Montessori Community Conversations. I stopped counting, so I don't know how many it is today, but it's really lovely to see you. And today our guest is Heidi Philippart. I'm in Prague. My name is Mirka, and Heidi is in Amsterdam, Netherlands. Heidi is an A.M.I. 0 to 3 trainer. She has been working with us in Prague at Montessori Institute Prague, giving courses and trainings. And she was really kind to respond to our plea to give the talk today. Those of you who were with us in the previous weeks remember that when we have the conversation after the talk, we very often end up talking about parents and about how to support parents. And so that's the reason why we asked Heidi to give a talk, which is to support parents. So hopefully many of you who are here are specialists, but hopefully many of you who are here today are parents. And hopefully you walk away from this conversation feeling that you have heard some really nourishing and supporting information. We are keen, us, the Montessorians of the world, to partner with you. And that's why we are doing this. There needs to be a partnership between Montessori teachers and schools and parents. We are very aware of it. We are more aware of it than ever. And we really are keen on doing things which support you in your Montessori parenting role. So that's why we are here today. And Heidi, please share with us what you have. There will be a talk for about half an hour or so, and then we can share, talk, and discuss whatever we need to discuss. Thank you, Heidi. Go ahead.
Well, it's so lovely to see you all, and especially all my dear friends. I see there's quite a few dear friends there and old colleagues and lots of great minds out there. So I hope we can share our knowledge together today. I mean, it's really lovely to see you all. And for those of you that I don't know, I mean, we are still united in many ways. And one of the things that unites us all is this love of humanity and this belief in the child and in a better future. And I think everybody is really pulling together at this very difficult time to really make the best of this moment. And even though times have been difficult, we have seen the silver lining in many places coming through. And we want to keep more of those silver linings coming through from this experience. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Heidi Philippart. And yes, my journey started a long time ago. Don't let these girlish looks fool you, but my journey started a long time ago. And it started by meeting young Montessori adults. And the thing was, they really fascinated me. Their intellectual independence. I mean, they did fantastic things. They taught themselves to speak German. They taught themselves to play the piano. They did international charity work. They really were, what shall we say, these people to really look up to. But there was really something different about the way they did life. Yes? There was really something about the way they did life that was different. And then I got introduced to the Montessori toddler. And being introduced to these, young children in love with life, what impressed me was that they were speaking sometimes more than 2 languages. They could dress themselves. They could make themselves a sandwich. And, sometimes they even did a flower arrangement. And after this, I really became more fascinated by Montessori. Then went on to become an assistant in a Montessori school, a Montessori teacher, then a school owner. Be careful, it's catching. Once you start doing one Montessori course, then other things start to happen. Then the big one came. Then I became a mother. And that was where things were really put to the test. Then a trainer for A.M.I. And here I am, still learning. And I have to say, I'm learning mostly from the children I work with, and especially from my 2 sons. And I hope today that my main aim today is to empower you But the one thing I want to do is I want to empower you to let the children in your lives lead you down this extraordinary path. Because, you know, when Montessori said, follow the child, she really did know what she was talking about. And I know in that day and age, when she said, follow the child, there wasn't many people following the child. But the one thing I can say is everything I ever learned as a Montessori student, everything I ever said to a parent while teaching, when I had my own children, it really was there to test me and sometimes really scare me. You know, we would say haunt you. Practice and theory doesn't always click together. But when you truly follow the child and you start to understand some of the basic developmental sort of attributes of this creative being, because this child is so creative, life is good. Life is really good. And you will meet the wonderful twos, and you will never see the terrible twos if you truly follow this child. I mean, they are such a pleasure to be with. This is my hometown. This is Amsterdam. I have to say it's a little bit wet today in Amsterdam and windy, although it's actually, we're starting to see some blue sky and sun. So hopefully we'll get some nice weather. But I must say I feel very fortunate to be living in such a beautiful city. It really is a pleasure to be here. And talking about cities and talking about environments, that's something I really want to talk to you about today, because the environment is really the most important aspect of Montessori practice, because it's through the interaction with the environment that this child really builds himself. Yes, and he has this possibility to reach his full potential through this interaction with the environment. But in order for this to really happen, what we have to be careful of is the environment must keep evolving with this child, because that's all this child ever does is really change. And I think where we get stuck is we often forget to change with the child. We have to change our role as parents as well as the physical environment. We all have a relationship with our environment, okay? Where we live, where we shop, where we go on vacation. And we all have this relationship because we interact with our senses. Yes, we see, smell, taste, hear, touch. And the toddler really knows about this element of touch. They really want to touch everything. They really want to explore everything. And the environment really influences us, but it also reflects who we are. And we really have to take care of ourselves and take care of others. And we must be aware of the needs of the child, and that the environment is really part of his toolbox. Yes, this really is part of the child's toolbox. Now, this young child is really a sensorial learner. He's in love with life, and anyone that's ever mistakenly walking in, you know, if you walk into a china shop with a 2-year-old, you know that's all they want to do is touch everything. So this young child really needs reality-based learning, because he really believes in everything. He believes in everything you tell him and everything he sees. If you tell him there's a monster in the cupboard, he will believe you, because he hasn't opened enough cupboards to realize that there's never a monster in that cupboard. Now, toddlers are practical. If it looks like food, they're going to eat it. If it looks like a drink, they'll drink it. If it looks like a stool, they'll sit on it. So as parents and people with these young children, we have to remember this, They're not doing sometimes these actions to test us or because they don't have the cognitive abilities to understand properly what it is. What you have to realize is they are learning from their environment the whole time. And if they recognize something as a drink, as food, they will eat it and drink it. And often we forget that this child is still taking in all this information from the environment, and they still need to learn all these concrete facts. So this is why at this age, we give the child lots of reality-based learning. Now, the home environment is by far the most important environment for the child. And I'm sure none of you will dispute this. And especially because this is the first environment the child has to adapt to. This is where he's going to learn movement. This is where he's going to learn language. He's going to learn about his freedoms and the limits that he has. And eventually, this child will arrive at the true goal of this environment, which is independence. And this is what we have to keep in mind, is the true goal of the environment is independence. Now, the environment is going to be an important part of this child's development, because the child is now creating a human being of this time and place. And you know, in Montessori, when we talk about environment, we're not actually just talking about the physical environment. We always talk about the human environment as well. And each environment has as much importance as each other. They are both important environments for the child. And we have to look at both aspects of those. This has been a hard time for everyone. And this experience of being in quarantine for many toddlers, for them, it's created some of the best and most memorable moments of their lives. It's created memories that they will carry with them forever throughout their life. Because this being at home and not being on the treadmill of life, they haven't been on that little gerbil wheel running round and round, having to sort of stick to these very strict, rigid schedules. Parents have had more time for them. They've had more time to play. They've had more time to relax. And the special intelligence that this child has, which Montessori calls the absorbent mind, allows the child to adapt. It allows the child to adapt to his environment, to his culture. And this is why for the toddler, it wasn't a problem. It wasn't a problem for them to be at home. It was quite interesting. I had lots of sort of Zoom meetings and phone calls with families, and it was the parents that were struggling, not the children. The toddler is the expert at adaptation. They have this phenomenal creative power. And it's the home that gives them an abundance of knowledge. It gives them knowledge about themselves. It gives them knowledge about their family, about their culture. And all this learning is really coming from the family. And it's this that gives him the tools he needs for life. Remember, I said to him, the home environment is one of the best tools that the child has in really constructing himself. And what we see is day by day, he becomes more an individual and his needs are constantly changing. And that's what we have to remember, is this constant change. You know, we have to be careful. We sometimes create the most beautiful bedroom for this newborn that's going to arrive. And suddenly this teenager is still in that very same bedroom. So we have to make sure that we are evolving the environment with the child, and also that we are evolving as parents, as carers, as teachers, that we are also changing our role, because the child needs us in different ways at different moments. This is what we want, is we want a home environment that's flexible and that's going to evolve. And here's a beautiful quote from Montessori. Would somebody like to read the quote for me? Do I have any volunteers to read the quote?
I have found that in this development, the child passes through certain phases, each of which has its own particular needs. The characteristics of each are so different that the passages from one phase to the other have been described by certain psychologists as rebirth.
Yeah. And you see, this is a picture of the first plane of development, the first 6 years of life. And you see just how much this child changes in the first 6 years. I mean, we have this babes in arms. Yes, that's very sort of independent. And then we already, in 3 years, we see this functionally independent 3-year-old. Yes, that's dressing themselves, that can talk, that can move well. That's really starting to, and they start to crystallize all that development that they learned in the first 3 years. And then what we see is, by the time we get to these 6-year-olds, we really see now a little Dutch boy, a little French girl. We see really a child of this time and place. They really have transformed. Yes. And this transformation has taken place because of this interaction with the environment. Now, our job is really to create this loving environment that's both functional and harmonious to the child's development. We really want to be creating this harmony. So what we're going to do is we're going to link the child to the environment by giving him support. And not only do we have to give him support, but we have to give him independence. We have to allow the child to act freely in the environment. While we allow the child to act freely in the environment, we have to also provide clear order for the child, and we have to make sure that this environment is safe. Of course, all Montessorians know is that order is important. But one of the things that we have to do is we really have to observe the child. We really have to observe the child so we can modify the environment and we can remove any obstacles that are getting in the way of the child's development. And if a Montessori home is anything, it really is an environment where there is respect for humanity and each individual in that environment. So together, we are going to play, live, and work together with this child, really celebrating this joy of life. If we don't have the joy of life, then we might as well just go home now. And so that's really important. And one of the things that we have to be aware of is, if we're going to give this child these freedoms, and we're going to allow the child to have some independence, and we are going to support this development, there's some very important development taking place. And one of the things that we want to talk about is movement.
Do you know a toddler who runs as soon as he catches sight of an open hallway or grassy field? This is because he was born to move. Movement and sensory exploration in the first 3 years of life are vitally important. Allow your child freedom to move. Your child's brain develops through his hands-on experiences. He explores. She gains knowledge of the world. Her intellect grows through her explorations and experiences. A child who is restricted in movement is limited in exploration and in experiences that develop the connections between the brain and the body. The dynamic connection between the mind and the body, which we call coordination, is developed through unrestricted movement opportunities. Your child is biologically driven to move, to grow, and to acquire the ability to control his body. Prepare your home to allow for maximum freedom to move and avoid baby equipment which may prevent movement. A movement mat is a place where your baby can explore and exercise her muscles both on her back and on his tummy.
If we think about the movement of young children, we become aware of all the differences between children. And this is due to the fact that their movement is very much related and dependent on their experiences in the environment. And you saw there some opportunities that those children were given to move. You saw some very key features that are not typical for such a young child. You saw the mattress on the floor so the child could get in and out of bed themselves. You saw also opportunities for them to run, for them to really move in the environment. And so what we have to do in the home environment is we really have to make sure that we create opportunities to allow freedom of movement. We're going to provide opportunities for this very young child to slither, for this young child to be able to crawl, to run, and more importantly, to work with their hands. Because it's really this working with the hands and manipulating objects that the child really starts to gain knowledge about the environment. When they're able to reach and bat at the mobile, they realize, I did that. I moved the mobile. That was me. So they start to learn a lot about themselves in the environment and a lot about the objects in the environment. It gives them knowledge. And, the hands really are the tools of intelligence. And this is what Montessori said again and again. And for me, it's becoming sort of quite a worry, because what you're starting to see our lives are becoming very sort of screen orientated. We're starting to see children moving less. Times like this that we are in now, like these lockdowns and quarantines, it's really important that we try and look for opportunities for the child to move. Whether it's, letting them help us sort of carry things around the house, moving pieces of furniture to change the environment, letting them walk up the stairs themselves. We really have to look for these opportunities really for them to move. So, movement is one of those main attributes, but one of the next things that I really wanted to talk about was also, not only is this child creating movement in the home environment, he also has to create language. And what has been amazing is a lot of parents, when they returned back to my school after being in quarantine for a long time, they were all really worried about their child's language development. But what was really fascinating to see was how they had all had these huge language explosions. I mean, Montessori wrote about these language explosions, and that we clearly saw. Lots of them had these explosions into words, lots of them had these explosions into spoken language, and even the languages that they weren't exposed to anymore, because living in an environment where most people are bilingual, even some of them hadn't been exposed to their second or third language, but when they returned to school, it had still developed, because this child really creates language. And we know from as early as 6 months in the uterus, the baby can hear the mother's voice and he starts to react to the sounds around him. And the home environment really plays an important role in the development of language, because this child is learning from the siblings, they're learning from the parents, and basically everybody in the child's environment is really a language teacher for this child. And that's something we often forget, because we often think because they're little, we think, oh, he doesn't understand that. He doesn't understand what we're saying. And sometimes, you know, we don't worry about the quality of language that we expose the children to. And this is something that we really have to really pay attention to, that we really are exposing the child to good quality language. And I've put this slide up now because the one thing that's really important is that your child really does feel that he's valued by you, and that you are really listening to him. And even the youngest of children, they need to know that you're listening to their cries, that the environment is going to respond to them, and that their needs are going to be met. Remember that crying is a form of communication, and it really is their main language tool. I'm here, help me. I need food. I need, my nappy needs to be changed. And we need to be showing this child that we are listening to them. The one thing that I think is important for people to remember are the 4 necessities for spoken language. And I'm going to take you on to, I'm going to show you the 4 necessities for spoken language, those of you that have never heard this said before. But you'll see, every child, for the development of spoken language to happen, every child needs a healthy, functioning auditory apparatus. No one will dispute that. They need to be able to hear. Okay, they need a healthy, functional vocal apparatus. No one will dispute that. And these are very physical things, and we don't have much of an influence on these things. If there's problems, yes, we have to turn to medical professionals to help us out in this area, but there's not much we can do about that. But one of the things that we can do a lot with is this 3rd necessity that I have on the slide here, this environment rich in language. Now, the more plentiful the use of language in the environment, the greater the child's development will be. If there are limitations in the language environment, then there will be limitations in the child's development. Now, the child under 3 is very sensitive to this. So it's the adults in the environment that really have to take responsibility for making sure that this environment is a rich language experience for the child. And those of you that work in environments, those of you that are working in communities with young children, it's really important that you rotate your language materials frequently. And, you know, because we have to remember this child has this special type of intelligence at this age, and they do have the capacity to absorb the language from their environment. So the richer that language is, the richer their vocabulary and development is going to be. So we want the language in this child's environment to be of the highest standard possible. And we really want, you know, good quality language spoken around the child. Then This last one, which is sometimes forgotten, this desire to communicate, this is a very important psychological aspect of language development. This child needs to feel that we're really interested in them, that we're interested in their stories, that we're interested in their ideas and their experiences. Otherwise, their desire to speak is going to be really, really quashed. You know, we really want this child to feel that we're hanging on every word that they say, that we really are interested in them. So often you hear people saying, you know, oh, I'm busy now, come back later, not now, or, you know, people are busy with their chores and routines that they have to do. The other thing is often we don't have the patience sometimes to really stop and listen. And this seems, you know, this sometimes seems like an obvious thing to say, but often we don't model what proper conversation is. And proper conversation is really listening to another person as well. So we need to be modeling conversation, and we need to be modeling this listening. I think for us with toddlers, what happens a lot is when they're trying to speak, sometimes we speak for them. Sometimes we too quickly assume what they're going to say, and we jump right in there and say something. So one of the things that we have to try and train ourselves to do is we need to sort of train ourselves to sort of speak slowly, speak clearly, make good eye contact, try and bend down onto the child's level, and really have the utmost respect for any attempt at conversation. And sometimes we don't know what they're trying to say, but we have to be sort of reassuring to them that we are still listening to them and we're still taking their needs into consideration. If you give them time and you allow them time to really choose their words, they will be able to express themselves. Even that non-verbal communication, if you give them the time to just point to something, show me what you want, take you to what they want, they'll be able to communicate effectively. And we have to remember, you know, the art of conversation, you know, is really being lost now for a lot of children, because they've seen a lot of interaction with screen now. And here I am talking to a screen. So I feel it's a little bit ironic. Here I am talking to a screen, and it's quite bizarre talking, because I don't get, you know, you don't get the same. I know I see all these lovely smiling faces and people nodding, but you don't get the same interaction from a screen as what you do from a human being. I'd like to show you. I have this very nice little clip. It came from an Australian advert, and it reinforces this this concept that we're talking about. Okay, so I've discussed movement briefly, and I discussed language briefly. And the next thing we're going to look at is this concept of freedom and limits, because this was something that a lot of parents have been struggling at home with. Now, freedom and limits is a volatile topic, especially for parents and caregivers. And when people generally think of this topic, they just think of obedience and discipline. But what we have to remember is when you look at this child under 3, okay, you've got to remember that obedience is really directed by the will. And this child is still developing their will. Okay, we know, I mean, if you look at modern neuroscience, we know that this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, yes, where these executive functions are developed, yes, this ability to be able to inhibit your behavior, yes, it doesn't really start to mature and develop until around 4 years of age. So this child under 3 really has a problem, well, not a problem, but I mean, he just can't. He finds it difficult really to do anything, you know, you see what I say on the slide. He finds it difficult to do anything that really is in conflict with his desires. Now, the problem is, as parents, we start to, because this child has this strong sense of order and he likes routine and he follows the routine and he's attached to the order of the environment, we start to think that this child is actually inhibiting his behavior and that he's actually following the rules. But what he's actually doing, he's following the routines and he's following the structure of his environment. And it's this order and structure that makes that possible, and it's what makes him feel safe. And of course, what we start to see is we start to see somewhere around these wonderful 2s where he starts to become much more aware and conscious. This is when the child, when he starts to become aware, this is when the child really starts to sort of question some of the routines and question some of the order of the environment. And we get shocked. We're wondering, why is suddenly this child that was very obedient before suddenly being disobedient? And it's not that he's being disobedient, it's just that he's really following what Montessori says is he's really following his A.M.I, his sort of his life force, you know, and he's really following these sort of vital urges of what he needs to do in order to develop. And Montessori talks about these 3 levels of obedience. And, you know, because we're doing just a general overview now, I'm not going to talk about the 3 levels of obedience, but I will talk about this first level of obedience. You know, the adult now, because of this first level of obedience, you really have to be observant of this child, and you have to understand that this child is only following your request when it really matches their desire. The only thing they can be obedient to is this A.M.I, yes, this vital force, this life force that they have. And it's important that the adult is really gentle in guiding the child through making choices. So this is why with these young toddlers that we give them very simple choices, and we're just going to give them very simple choices, just 2 choices. Would you like a cheese sandwich or would you like peanut butter? We're also going to only give them 2 choices we know they can make. I'm not going to say to them, you know, would you like to go to Spain on holiday or would you like to go to, you know, grandma's house? Yes, they know what grandma's house is, but they don't know enough about Spain to make that choice. So we're only going to give them also choices we know that they understand and that they can make. And, you know, once you have realistic expectations of this child under 3, it's much easier to understand their frustrations. It's much easier to support them. It's much easier to live with them. And the thing is, with this child under 3, they really are in love with life, with activity, and with doing things. They really are a pleasure to be with. So knowing that they can't always follow the rules in the way that we traditionally expect children to follow the rules, it then puts you in a different mindset, and it also makes it easier to accept their behavior and be prepared to give them an appropriate limits and choices, so that they can, they learn the limits. For every freedom that they have, there should be a consistent limit. So that's something important that we have to do when we set the limits with them. We have to make sure that we carry through on those limits, so they learn the consequences of their choices. Yeah. Now, true freedom and limits are really key in helping the child develop their will, because the more they practice making choices, the more they can develop their will. And Montessori realized this, and what she said to us is that we have to have these expectations based on knowledge of the child's development. Yes, and independence, this sort of independent thinking, doesn't actually start at 3 or 6 or 9 or 12 years of age. Independence actually starts at birth, and it really is a process of development. And what we see is often we're afraid to give the child these little independent choices from a very young age, that we start to manipulate some of the choices. If you look at things like food, like going to the toilet, when to sleep, we start to try and force patterns onto the children, and we try to force our will on when we want them to eat, when we want them to sleep, when we want them to use the toilet. But what we have to do is, what we have to realize, if we keep choosing for the child and telling the child what to do, when will the child actually decide for himself what to do? When will he have the chance to practice making a choice? And we see often, parents sometimes will carry a child into school and then complain that this child doesn't want to walk. Yes, so we have to be making sure that we're allowing the child opportunities to be independent. Now, would somebody like to read this next slide for me?
When does the child need to begin to do things by himself without help? The answer is simple. The child needs to do things by himself from the beginning of life, from the moment he is capable of doing things. The urge is revealed again and again by the child. We have so often heard children of a few years of age say, "Help me to do it by myself." By helping the child to do things by himself, you are helping the independence of the child.
Yeah. Again, there's that famous quote, "Help me to do it myself." I mean, what we have to realize is this child is really striving for this functional independence. I can do it by myself. And what happens is when they have this functional independence, this lays the foundation for this emotional independence. I can feel for myself. And then this is connected with this intellectual independence. I can think for myself. While the child begins sort of life very independent, very sort of dependent on us, yes, and a little bit helpless, what you start to see is this drive for independence is really strong in this young child. And what you see is this child is really pushed to experience life and interact with life and the outer environment. And what we want in the home environment, we want to look at our home environment and we want to say to ourselves is can the child be independent in this house? And how can I support this independence? We should be sort of taking a trip through the house with the child. And I often say to parents and to students when I'm working with students, we should start at the front door with this house. We should walk into the house. What are we going to do in the hallway? Is there a place to hang up my coat? Is there a mirror where I can look at myself? Is there a place to put my shoes? Have we prepared this area for the child to be independent as he enters the house? Then when he walks into the living room or the family room, is there a place for him to sit and relax? Or does he feel like he's living in, the land of the giants? Yes. Does he have his own chair that he can sit in? Does he have a book that he can take himself to read? And we should be going to every room of the house and seeing if there is a place for this child in this house. Does the child have his own place in this house? And of course, he's going to need a different environment at different stages. But what we want is this child to feel they're at home, and this is my home. This is my place. Now, I'm not going to talk much about the physical environment, because I know you've had there's been a lot of things online about the physical environment. And I want to talk more about some of the supports that we can really sort of give the child to be more independent and understanding sort of what this child needs. One of the things that we have to really hold back on is that we only do what's absolutely necessary for the child. Now, could someone read this quote again for me?
This philosophy teaches never give up, never give more help than is absolutely necessary. The child who was once to walk by himself must be allowed to try, because he wants strength, and developing power is practice, and practice is still needed after the basic power has been attained. His own actions are what take the little one along the road to independence.
Yes. And what happens is we tend often to do a little too much for the child. As soon as we start to see them struggle a little bit, or if there's a bit of chaos in the environment, we tend to want to sort of jump right in there and fix it and solve it for them. But what we want to do is we want to support this child to be independent. And one of the first things that we want to give them is we really want to give them choice. Yes? Because the child who's free to make his own choices in the environment starts to understand how it works. And he starts to understand the expectations of the environment and the consequences of those choices. It's very important that we give the child choice whenever we can. Yes? Would you like to set the table, or would you like to chop some fruit for lunch? And this starts very early. Even the choice of when we look at that newborn in arms. I mean, we're not gonna force feed them. We're gonna let the child attach to the breast when they are ready. We're gonna let them finish their feed when they're ready. So this ability to choose is going to be going all the way through life with this child. So choice is very important for the development of independence. and for the child at every stage. The next point you see I have on the slide is respect. We're going to interact with one another gracefully and respectfully. And we have to respect the child's achievements, but we also have to respect the child's struggles. So in order to sort of empower this child, I'm going to say to the child, oh, I see that zip's a little bit tricky. Can I help you do this little bit? Can I help you with one shoe? You can do the next shoe. But what we're going to do is we're going to have respect for his participation. We're going to really collaborate with the child. We're not going to just overtake his ability to sort of do things for himself. We want him to really try to do these things. When it comes to encouragement, I mean, we're not going to give idle praise, but we're going to honor the effort that the child has made with his work. We acknowledge the skills. So we're not going around saying, oh, good job, well done, good job. What we're going to try and do is we're going to say, oh, I see you've set the table for the whole family. Thank you. That was a lot of plates. That was a lot of cups. So we're going to really acknowledge his effort and his work, because this really helps build his self-esteem, it builds his confidence, and he feels valued, and he feels like he's really sort of contributing to family life. This next point, no unnecessary help, is an important point for us when we're living and working with children. We don't want to be too quick to do a task for the child. We want to allow the child time to do things for himself. Otherwise, we really create dependency, and we really disempower the child. Usually, the rule of thumb is you never do anything for a child that he can really do for himself. And this was a very famous quote of Montessori, and this was one of the key pointers that she would always give to people she was working with, new people that maybe didn't have any training or experience of working with children or in the way that she worked. But what she would always say is no unnecessary help. The next thing that we're going to do with this toddler is we're going to give him hope, because sometimes adults can be a little bit discouraging to the child, making him feel he's not capable of doing things for himself, and this has to be. We have to be sort of very careful with how we do this. Sometimes he tries to do a skill that's a little bit above him, because he's seen his sibling do it, he's seen an older child do it, and he wants to try this activity. So we have to say to him, well, maybe when you're 4 you'll be able to do this, or maybe tomorrow there'll be more bananas, and you can cut a banana tomorrow. So we're always going to give the child hope. We're never going to we don't want to crush him. We don't want to knock his confidence or self-esteem. We want him to be encouraged that things are possible, and he will get there in the end. We spoke about movement earlier. We had a sort of a quick summary of this realization that we have to allow this freedom of movement for the child, and we have to allow the child to be free to move. Now, if we allow the child to move independently, this means that we're not going to carry him all the time. We're not going to clothe him unnecessarily. We're going to let him, try to feed himself, try to dress himself. we're going to, provide lots of opportunities for movement for him. And if the more we keep doing things for him, the more this child is going to feel they need an adult to survive. When the child really starts to move for himself, he'll really start to be able to do for himself through this movement. So we really, want to make sure we have this freedom of movement. Freedom of movement is crucial for the toddler, because the toddler loves to move, and they're also very focused on the development of their movement as well. We know there's a very strong sensitive period for the development of movement at this age, and what they do in these first 3 years is amazing. They go from this babes in arms to this running, walking, singing person by the time they're 3. So it really, movement is crucial for them, and especially this freedom of movement. We also want them to be free to talk. We want them to be able to really express their needs, their emotions, their likes and their dislikes. And we want them to learn that they have a voice, and that their voice is respected, and that they're valued by others. And we want the child to learn the power of language. Language is a very powerful tool, and it's a very powerful tool in terms of the development of independence, when you can share your ideas, your feelings and your thoughts with others. So, so this freedom to speak is important for the child. It's also important that we don't talk about the child in front of him. And of course, people that are in lockdown now and people that are in the home environment, this can sometimes be hard. So it's really important that we try and make time, especially to have conversations about the children with our partners or colleagues. It's really important that we don't do this in front of the children. We don't want to be saying, oh, this child is really shy, because they start to think that they're really shy. We don't want to be talking about them negatively. So, we must also make time to talk independently with our partners without the child being there. Remember, when the child hears people talking about him, he starts to really form his sort of self-image based on their statements. So if this child hears you saying he's very shy, he does not like to go to the toilet alone, he's scared of the dark, he will start to believe that. Especially because, a parent, a teacher, you're important figures in this child's life. They have this very strong attachment with you. They're looking to you for guidance. And then, if they trust what you say, they trust in you, and then they believe everything you say. So they will believe that they are shy, that they are afraid. They will believe this. The next point, which sometimes people think this is a little bit of a strange point, but we have to be careful that we give the child ownership of his body. We must be respectful of the child's body and not always fixing the child and evading the child's personal space. Often, we're straightening their hair, we're wiping their nose without asking, we're washing their face without asking. We must show the child that he is capable of taking care of his body. And also, when we constantly fix them, it gives them the feeling that they're not good enough. And we really don't want to give the child this feeling that they're not good enough. The last point is this not too many no's. And And you can say no in Montessori. I remember someone saying to me, can you say no to the child? Yes, you can say no. But, we don't want to be given too many no's. Saying no too often limits the child and his independence. Try and offer the child a choice instead of saying no. You can say, yes, when Ryan has finished the puzzle, you can do it. Let's do the threading while you wait. And this gives the child an opportunity then to do something else. It's also not a, no, you can't do this work. Heidi's doing it. No, you can't have that. It gives the child, it goes back to that, one of the things we said, it gives the child hope. It gives them a feeling that their point of view is respected, and it aids in the development of their independence, in that they have a choice then to do something else. That no is not something to be afraid of, because they learn then to trust you, and that you don't break your promise, and that they will do it later, and there will be something tomorrow for them to do. The goal of the home environment is really this functional independence, and I think that's where we go into, is that we have to have this understanding of the development that this child is working on and the things that they are struggling with. So the goal is functional independence, and I think what we have to realize is, if we look at sort of Montessori, I mean, she was an advocate of sort of world peace, and she grew up in a time of war and seeing the detriment of war on humanity. Yes, and she believed in that sort of peace really started with education and the child, and the child really was our future. Now, I think what's happened now is we've gone away from the fact that we've forgotten how important the home environment is, and we've forgotten the amount of learning that the child does in the home. And when we started to get into this situation of lockdown, people went into a panic, and we're wondering, what can we do in the home environment? Basically, it was collaboration and just doing life together. That is one of the most important things that we can do with the child, is this collaboration of daily life. And collaborating with your child in daily life is really the greatest gift you can give them. So what I would say to you is, be brave and follow the child. Let the child lead you. Have understanding for what they're doing, that they're creating their movement, they're creating their language, they're learning how to follow the limits. Follow the child, because they will lead us down the right path. The end.